I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to catch his wife cheating on him. I mean, I knew there were always little signs, forgetting anniversaries, late nights that turned into work emergencies, the occasional snippy remark if I asked where she'd been. But I brushed it off because I didn't want to believe the worst. Her name, Emily, and she's always been the kind of woman who acts like she's too busy for stupid questions, always quick to dismiss anything that might make her look bad. She's gorgeous, sure, but she's also a real bitch when she doesn't get her way. We've been married about 5 years, and lately she'd been acting more detached than usual. She'd come home later than ever, always with that fake tired look, saying she was working late or meeting with clients. But I started noticing her phone was glued to her side. She was secretive about her texts, and she'd get defensive if I asked about her evening plans. I caught her lying more than once, and I knew something was up. It wasn't just paranoia, it was obvious something was wrong. I decided to play it smart. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I had a feeling I needed proof. So I hired a private investigator. His name was Mark, and I paid him to follow Emily around for a couple of weeks to see if anything suspicious showed up. I thought maybe I was overreacting, maybe she was just stressed, or maybe she was talking to an old friend. But deep down, I knew. I felt it in my gut. Mark was supposed to file reports, give me updates, nothing invasive, just enough to catch her in the act if she was fooling around. I was anxious, nervous even, but I convinced myself I just needed to know the truth. And then I waited. The first few days I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for that call or message that would set my mind at ease or confirm my worst fears. But nothing. Until one afternoon, I got a strange message from Mark's partner, Jason. It was brief, but it hit me like a punch to the stomach. It said that Mark had uncovered some pretty damning evidence that Emily was involved with someone. Something about late-night visits, a lot of secret calls, and even some suspicious hotel receipts. I was stunned. My mind raced. I couldn't believe it. Emily, my wife, my partner, was cheating on me. And with a guy I had hired to follow her, I couldn't breathe for a second. It was like the floor had dropped out from under me. I thought I knew her, thought I knew everything about her. Turns out I knew nothing. Now I had all this evidence in my hands, but I didn't want to confront her right away. I needed to think, to plan. Because once I did, I knew things wouldn't be the same. Not after this. Not after I found out she'd been lying to my face for months. I kept myself busy, pretending to be normal, but inside I was raging. I wanted to destroy her, to make her feel exactly what I was feeling. But I also knew I had to be smart. I had to be careful, because I'd been played for a fool. And I was done being the idiot who trusted his wife. All of this, I realized, was just the beginning of a long, painful process. The more I sat with the evidence, the angrier I got. I mean, this wasn't just a fling or a quick mistake. This was a full-blown affair. Emily had been running around behind my back, lying to my face, and worse, she had the nerve to act like everything was fine. When I finally confronted her, she was her usual bitchy self, throwing a fit, trying to deny everything at first. She looked me dead in the eyes and told me I was nuts, that I was imagining things, that I was paranoid. I played it cool, but inside I was boiling. I already knew she was lying. The proof was in her phone, her bank statements, and the hotel receipts. I kept the evidence in a folder, ready to throw it in her face at the right moment. But I didn't want to do it right away. I wanted her to sweat, to think she was getting away with it. I wanted her to see how much I knew, how much I'd uncovered. I started watching her more carefully. Every little reaction, every nervous glance, every time she brushed off my questions. She kept up her act, bitchy, dismissive, and completely oblivious to how transparent she was. I could tell she thought she was clever, that she could just lie her way out of everything, but I wasn't buying it anymore. The game was over. Then one night I decided to take things further. I set up a hidden camera in our bedroom, just to catch her in the act if she was stupid enough to slip up. That night I laid in bed, pretending to sleep, but I was watching. And sure enough, she slipped out of bed and went to our guest room. I followed her on my phone. What I saw was worse than I expected. She wasn't just talking to her lover on the phone or texting. She was doing more, she was actually meeting him. I saw her sneaking out in the middle of the night wearing some slutty dress I'd never seen before. I felt my stomach turn. How could she do this to me? After all these years, after all we shared, I'd always thought we had something special, at least I thought I did. Turns out she saw me as a fool, a sucker she could manipulate. When I finally confronted her the next morning, she was furious. Her tone was all attitude, like she didn't owe me any explanation. She called me paranoid, insecure, and told me I was making a big deal out of nothing. She claimed she'd been stressed, that I was overreacting, that it was just sex with him, and it didn't mean anything. She even had the nerve to say I was the one who was lazy, that I didn't satisfy her anymore, that she needed excitement. That was the moment I knew she was a bitch, a manipulative, lying bitch who thought she could walk all over me. I was furious, but I also felt crushed. How could someone I loved, someone I trusted, do this? It felt like my whole world was collapsing. I kept staring at her, trying to process the betrayal. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to everything, the lies, the cheating, the way she looked at me that morning like she owned me. I realized I was at a crossroads. I had evidence, I had a plan, and I had every reason to call her out. But I also knew I'd be playing her game if I just went ballistic now. I decided to keep quiet for a moment to see what she'd do next. The truth was, I wanted revenge. I wanted her to feel what I felt, humiliated, betrayed, and insignificant. But I also knew that if I wanted to do this right, I should gather more. I needed to get under her skin, see how deep her lies went. That's when I hired a detective, again, discreetly, just to see if she'd slip up even more. I didn't want to just catch her cheating. I wanted to ruin her life if I could. And then, just as I started to think I had her cornered, things took a turn I wasn't ready for. Mark, the detective, called me back with some shocking news. His partner, Jason, had uncovered something even more disturbing, something about Emily's own lies, her deception, her manipulations. It was explosive. The pieces were fitting together, and I realized I hadn't just been played, I'd been a fool from the start. Then Jason, the detective's partner, called me late that evening, and what he told me hit me like a freight train. He said that Mark had been secretly recording Emily's interactions, and the footage they had gathered was enough to make your skin crawl. But even more shocking was what Jason revealed about her. Turns out, Emily hadn't just been cheating on me with some random guy. She'd been involved with multiple men, and some of it was even more sordid than I expected. She wasn't just sneaking out for quick sex. She was genuinely living a double life, bouncing from one affair to another, flirting with danger and lying through her teeth the entire time. What made it worse was that Jason told me Emily had approached him herself, trying to bribe him to keep quiet about what he'd seen. She offered him money, promises, and even some kind of favors if he'd just delete the footage and pretend she was innocent. That's when I realized she wasn't just a cheating wife anymore. She was a manipulative, calculating liar who was willing to do anything to cover her tracks. I felt my stomach drop, my hands trembling. All those nights I'd been suspicious, all the arguments, the silent treatments, I'd been right, but I'd also underestimated her. She was dangerous in her own way, and I had been blind to it because I loved her. Or maybe because I wanted to believe in her. I don't know, it's kind of a blur now. But at that moment I knew. I had to face the truth and decide what to do next. I remember packing around my apartment trying to process this new information. I felt hurt, betrayed, and furious all at once. The thought that she had been playing me, lying to my face while I was working to expose her, that she was orchestrating some kind of sick game, made me want to scream. I couldn't believe I'd been so stupid. I'd always been the stable, dependable type, and she used that against me. I wondered how long she'd been doing this, how many nights she'd spent with other men while I was home, thinking she was just tired or busy with work. That night, I sat in silence, staring at the ceiling. I knew I couldn't keep pretending like it was all going to blow over. I had to decide whether to confront her again, to expose her completely, or to cut my losses and walk away. The thought of ending everything, of throwing away 5 years of marriage, scared me. But I also knew staying with her would be like living in a nightmare, an ongoing betrayal that I'd never recover from. The next day, I planned my move carefully. I decided I'd confront her face to face, not to argue, but to get her to admit everything. I set up a meeting at our place, knowing she'd come home expecting the usual fight or silent treatment. But I was prepared. I had the evidence, I had my resolve, and I was ready to finally lay it all out. I wanted her to see that I knew everything, that I wasn't some naive idiot anymore. When she arrived, she was her usual bitchy self, demanding, dismissive, quick to throw her attitude around. But I kept my cool. I told her I knew about her affairs, about the money she tried to pay off the detective, about the multiple guys she'd been sneaking around with. Her face twisted in anger and disbelief. She tried to deny it at first, but I laid the evidence on the table, screenshots, hotel receipts, recordings. She looked like she'd been punched in the gut. Her reaction was borderline unbelievable. She started screaming, calling me crazy, accusing me of spying on her, and trying to make me feel guilty for not trusting her. She called me insecure and weird, like I was the problem, but I wasn't having it anymore. I knew her game. I knew she had been lying for months. I told her she could pack her bags. I told her I wanted her gone, that I was done with her lies. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't going to be a fool anymore. I felt a mixture of relief and despair. Relief that I finally knew the truth, and despair that it had come to this. But I also felt stronger than I ever had before. Because now I knew the real Emily, her bitchiness, her lies, her manipulations. And I knew I had to get out before she dragged me further into her chaos. I'm still processing everything, still trying to figure out how I got here, but one thing's clear. I'm done being the sucker. From now on, I'm taking control of my life, and I won't let anyone, especially a lying wife, take that away from me. After she stormed out, furious and crying, I sat alone in the silence of our apartment, trying to breathe through the chaos. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me with this sick, hollow feeling in my stomach. I kept replaying everything, the lies, the deception. Her bitchy attitude, how she egged me on, trying to turn everything around on me. I'd always thought I knew her, thought she was my partner, my wife. But in reality, she was a master manipulator and a liar. That realization hit hard. For the rest of that day, I couldn't focus on anything else. I was numb, staring at the evidence I had collected, trying to process what I was supposed to do next. Part of me wanted to just forget it all, pretend it never happened, and try to save the marriage. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. She'd betrayed me in the worst way possible, cheating, lying, bribing witnesses, and trying to manipulate her way out of it. I was done. I decided I had to get legal advice. I reached out to a divorce attorney the very next day. I wanted to know my rights, what I was entitled to, and how I could protect myself financially and emotionally. The lawyer listened carefully, asked about the evidence, and then laid out a plan. She told me I had a strong case for divorce, possibly even for custody if we had kids, though we didn't, thank God. What I didn't tell her was how much this whole thing had shattered me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, and every ounce of trust I'd ever had in her was evaporating. In the meantime, I started packing my things. I didn't want her to think I was just going to sit around and wait. I moved some of my clothes and personal stuff into a friend's place nearby. I wanted to get some space, some clarity. I also made sure to change my passwords and lock down all my accounts. I didn't want her having access to anything anymore. I knew she'd try to manipulate her way back into my life, but I wasn't interested. Not anymore. I also reached out to a few close friends, people I trusted, and told them everything. I needed their advice, and honestly, I needed to hear that I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed. Most of them were furious on my behalf, calling her a bitch and telling me to get rid of her ASAP. That support helped a lot. It reminded me that I wasn't the idiot here she was, and I deserved better than a lying, cheating, manipulative woman who thought she could get away with everything. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, replaying the last few weeks in my mind. How I had ignored the signs, how I'd convinced myself she was just stressed or busy, how I'd given her the benefit of the doubt for so long, even when I felt something was off. I felt cheated, not just by her infidelity, but by my own naivety. That's what cut the deepest, realizing I'd been blind, naive, and so eager to hold onto a false idea of what we had. But I also felt a strange sense of relief, like I'd finally opened my eyes and I could start over. I knew I'd have a long road ahead, dealing with emotional fallout, sorting out my life, rebuilding trust in myself. but I was done being the fool. From this point forward, I promised myself I'd never ignore my instincts again. Never let someone manipulate me into thinking I was crazy for suspecting the truth. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her ruin my life anymore. I'd stand up, get through this, and come out stronger on the other side. The betrayal was a heavy weight, but it also served as a wake-up call. If there's one thing I learned, it's that sometimes you need to hit rock bottom before you can build back better. And honestly, I was just starting to climb out of that hole. Over the next few days, everything moved fast. I met with the divorce lawyer again, laid out all the evidence, and decided to proceed with the separation. I didn't want to drag this out. I wanted her out of my life as cleanly and quickly as possible. The more I thought about her sneaking around, lying, bribing investigators, she turned into someone I barely recognized. And honestly, I felt relieved that I was finally taking control. But the emotional toll was brutal. I kept replaying all the moments I'd ignored, her cold attitude, her sneering lies, the nights I'd convinced myself she was just stressed. It hurt to admit I'd been played, but it hurt even more to realize I'd loved a woman capable of so much betrayal. I felt angry, betrayed, sad all at once. I'd trusted her with everything and she'd used that trust to deceive me. That realization haunted me. One thing I did do was cut all contact. I blocked her on social media, changed my phone number, and told her she wasn't welcome to come back. I also started therapy, needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me process this mess. Honestly, I felt like I was walking around in a fog. Every day was a struggle between wanting to lash out at her and wanting to crawl into a hole and disappear. Neither choice felt right, but I knew I had to keep going. That's when I decided I needed to confront her face to face one last time. I scheduled a meeting at a neutral place, her favorite coffee shop actually. I wanted her to see that I was serious, that I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. When she arrived, she was still her bitchy self, throwing attitude, trying to act like everything was just some big misunderstanding. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. I laid everything out, evidence, the fact that I was filing for divorce, that she could say whatever she wanted, but I knew her game now. Her reaction was predictable. She yelled, called me a controlling, insecure idiot, said I was crazy for believing she'd cheat, but I just looked at her coldly and told her she'd been caught, plain and simple, that her lies had finally caught up with her. I told her she was a manipulative bitch who toyed with my life and I was done, that I wasn't going to let her ruin me anymore. I saw her face twist in anger, then in desperation. She tried to deny everything, tried to turn it around on me, but I had enough. I walked away from that meeting feeling exhausted but finally free. The weight of her betrayal was still there, but at least I knew I was taking the power back. I filed the divorce papers shortly after and the process was messy. Lawyers, mediations, emotional stress. But I was resolute. I refused to let her manipulate me into staying, into pretending everything was fine. What's worse, I've come to realize that her bitchiness, her lies, and her manipulations were just a reflection of who she truly was. Not someone I ever really knew, but someone I was better off never knowing. I've started focusing on myself, trying to rebuild what she tried to destroy. I've learned a lot about trust, about listening to my instincts, and about how brutal betrayal can be. Honestly, I still feel the sting of it all. But I also feel stronger, like I finally uncovered the truth and took control of my life again. The pain will fade, but the lessons won't. No more blind trust, no more ignoring my gut feelings. I know now that sometimes the biggest betrayals come from the people we love the most, and the only way to survive is to face it head on and keep moving forward. That's what I plan to do. Looking back, I can't believe how much my life changed in such a short time. It's like I was living in a fog, completely blind to what was really going on right under my nose. Emily's betrayal was one of the nastiest things I've ever experienced, and honestly, it tore me apart at first. But with time, I realized that the anger and pain I felt were just part of the process of healing. The truth is brutal, but it's also freeing. Now, I focus on rebuilding myself. I started going out more, reconnecting with friends, and even picking up hobbies I'd neglected while I was married. I do hate her anymore. I just see her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who used me because she thought I'd never find out. That realization gave me a strange sense of clarity. I don't regret what happened because it forced me to wake up and see things clearly. One thing I've learned is to trust my instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Don't dismiss that nagging feeling in your gut, because chances are it's telling you something important. And if you find yourself in a situation like this, feeling betrayed or manipulated, don't be afraid to ask for help, gather evidence, or take action. Because you deserve honesty, respect, and loyalty, not betrayal and lies. The biggest lesson I take from this ordeal is that even the worst betrayals can teach us resilience. I've grown tougher, more cautious, but also more aware of what I need to protect myself from. No one is immune to betrayal, but how you respond makes all the difference. I chose to face the truth, confront it head-on, and move forward. So I'm here to tell anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, don't let it break you. Use it as a wake-up call. Be honest with yourself about what you deserve and never settle for less. Trust yourself more than anyone else. Because in the end, the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. And I've learned that surviving betrayal isn't about revenge or anger. It's about reclaiming your life and learning to trust again, one step at a time.